Great. It's a pleasure to join you all today, and I'm joining you from Dubai, and along with my dear friend and colleague Hiroko, we're hoping to give you some perspectives from Asia, both on the gaps related to cultural policy information and monitoring systems, as well as really urgent needs. And I will talk today from my experience, as Ulrike has already said, working on compendium style profiles across Asia from 2011 to 2017, and also working with many Asian governments to get them to complete their mandatory periodic reports to UNESCO on the 2005 Convention on the Protection and Promotion of the Diversity of Cultural Expressions, as well as I want to share with you the results of a very formal consultation that we did in 2018 about what do we do with the future of this compendium project in Asia, which had developed for a few years, but then had got stalled, and which at the moment Ulrike and the team are trying to revive. Many of the things that I heard, particularly from Natasha, really resonate a lot between, the governments, how much to involve them, how much not to involve them, and then on the other side, the independence. I would say that on both sides in Asia, there was absolutely no doubt at all, including on the side of policymakers, that there is need for such systems. Whether we want to call them monitoring systems was highly contested, because at that time I was working in a publicly funded agency, and because we were putting our funding into this project, there was a lot of debate on whether we want to call it a monitoring system, but everyone, including governments, completely agreed to the need for a policy information system. So that's one of the compromises we sort of landed on. And even with some of the senior experts that we used as our authors for the profiles, when they began to write the profile, they found out so much more than what they knew. And I really would like to share with you the example of the profile of India that we had commissioned in 2011 with a very senior expert and a team of research associates to work with him. They said, well, it'll be done in 3 to 4 months. And then we never heard back from them for about 4 years. And then they came back, and we thought the investment is lost, basically. And after following up a few times, we gave up. But 4 years later, they came back with a 200-page cultural policy profile of India, having done extensive research, gone into archives, gone into state archives, national archives, and they were amazed by the amount of information that they found that they did not know that such policies, measures, schemes were in existence. And that for us was really a learning journey that even those of us who work in the sector, who are in research, may not have all the information when it comes to the Asian context. And this is also because in Asia, arts management or cultural policy research is not something that's easily available in the university system, except perhaps in Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong. So a large number of arts management courses are really run by private operators, by the sector themselves, and very often policy is not at all looked at within these programs. It's very much sometimes about event management, how do you build your networks, and most importantly, how do you raise funds? And the policy dimension is missing, and that's very, very unfortunate, because on one hand, we've heard a lot of arguments from the sector that there's so little public funding or public support for the arts in many parts of Asia that, talking about a cultural policy profile or following policy trends is meaningless when you compare to other contexts where there is greater public support. But given now what is happening in many parts of Asia, we also came to the realization that policies not only enable, they also restrict. And it is very important to know what policies govern us and our work, particularly the work of creating art. And this is part of the policy conversation. And it's also important to document if not public funders, who is funding the arts? Why are they funding the arts? And what does that mean for the arts ecosystem? And these were some of the big questions that over the 6 or 7 years in which we developed the Asian profiles came up repeatedly. We had a whole bunch of what questions. We tried to work with the compendium model, the chapters that Ulrike presented to you. But as Natasha was saying, data became a huge problem. There is not regularized data collection in many parts of Asia. Also, certain concepts became, as we struggled, for instance, with the concept of cultural participation, with the Indian team of authors saying cultural participation is not about going to the opera in India, it's about engaging at the community level. So we can't present anything in tables, but we want to present a more sort of, qualitative presentation of what cultural participation means Asia or in India and how it would be from, say, Europe. And we allowed for that to happen within that section, though that was not what that section was meant to do. So there was a lot of contestation, elaboration around concepts. And I think most importantly, what we felt when we prepared some of the profiles following very much the compendium model was that perhaps what would be interesting and important to do in the Asian context, where there is so little engagement from the sector on policy issues, is really tell a story. So how do we policy information, the facts on one hand, and how do we also tell the story? Can we somehow match some of the sections with living case studies, with photographs that kind of reflect also the dynamism of what's happening on the ground in the absence of public support? And this was one of the strongest recommendations we had when we did a consultation in 2018 to understand what do we do going forward with the profiles. And another big question in Asia was about who are we writing for? Who actually uses the profile? And are people writing it also the ones actively using it? And because much of Asia consumes its content on mobile devices, the very practical question we got from some of the people that we tried to reach out to with the profile was, we want something condensed, visual, and mobile friendly. And giving us a PDF of 200 pages simply does not work. So, we landed with a question that we still haven't answered. How can we be both intellectually rigorous and user-friendly if people are consuming this content on mobile? This led us also to really have big debates about formats. The large profiles, as I was saying, in India, it took us 4 years to complete a profile. Other profiles took at least 2 years. Given scarcity of information, various sorts of complexities. So one consensus that we landed on was that perhaps it would be better to do shorter profiles first. They need not be entire profiles of covering everything. They could be profiles related to a particular time period, to a particular important development within the sector, or perhaps looking, for example, at how is contemporary dance looking like on the policy landscape across South Asia, to also look at several countries all at once. And we knew the risk we were taking in considering this approach, because this means that you need absolutely excellent authors who would know much of the information that would go into a large profile, but then choose to do a shorter profile. So doing a shorter profile without having the longer profile intellectually, would that be a rigorous approach? Was a big question we had, but we did land on the fact that if we continue to take this forward, it would be better to start with a short profile and then go forward to the longer profile. The other thing we also agreed on was that we cannot wait for comparative analysis among the regional profiles in Asia until all the Asian profiles were ready, because we would be waiting for decades. And this would be a loss of the mutual learning opportunity, because much of the policy, the process of creating these profiles was also a learning opportunity between the various authors and the regions. And when we were working on it, we did regular annual meetings, bringing all the Asian authors and the supporting institutions together. And a lot of the learning actually happened there. So how do we then tackle this issue of also having some sort of regional perspectives already, even though certain countries may not have the profile? Then the big question of the authors, because we discovered that in Asia, you will also have, in some cases, to build capacities along the way as you have a local expert writing. So this means additional investment in capacity building and training. So this is no longer only a research project, it is also a capacity building project, and you need a funding and facilitating organization that is able to do both. And this also comes back to the point of very easily get, say, an expert from India to write about Pakistan or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka. It will be faster, it will be more efficient, but the whole idea is have local experts tell their own story and build local capacities along the way. If we look at it from this point of view, the investment is not just in finding an author to write a profile, but it's also in capacity building. And this leads us to the bigger question, is going to, one, invest in Asia, in building these profiles, parallelly in also building capacities in certain countries and contexts where you have to build local capacities to get that, through to complete the profile. And again, this is a slow project. You need a minimum of 3 to 5 years investment to get some of the profiles done, to get some of the updates done, and also to build capacities along the way. What kind of a funder are we looking for? The issue of having national funders was considered. We did have some national governments in Asia supporting their authors and others not. So in some cases, we went for sort of multilateral funding. I was working in an organization that's funded by 50 governments, including about 18 Asian governments. And so we used a multilateral pot of money to fund. This gave a bit of editorial independence. In other cases, national governments were willing to pay for their authors. But later, when we evaluated the process, at least one author told us that they would have felt more free to present the challenges or the downsides in their arts ecosystem if they had not been funded by their country. So the politics of involving national governments is something I think on a case-by-case basis has to be thought through. We also in Asia landed in many cases with a group of authors rather than a single author. And this also became in some cases senior and more junior researchers working together, or even practitioners working together, and we try also to build within that capacity building process so that younger research associates or practitioners would, through the process of creating this profile, also develop their capacities. The big question is, in Asia, we want to pick up on this project again, and it is really urgent that we do. The first and most important question would be that we find the right funder, but also the right sort of facilitating organization who can look at this as an Asian project, who can fund 3 to 5 years, and who can along the way build capacities, but also communicate the results of this project. I remember at one of the board meetings of the Asia-Europe Foundation where I worked, we were presenting the results of this project, and one of our board members, they're all from the government, so a government official said, "This is fantastic now that I actually see the profiles, but I have to tell you that this project of yours is one of the best kept secrets in the world because you absolutely don't communicate it. It's all there on your website, but who's going to fund it?" So this also led us to think that once the profile is done and ready, that is not the end of the process. That is actually the start of another process, which is communicating this profile, which is setting up conversations, putting it out there, taking the profile, making it more consumable for different audiences, including on mobile, particularly if we want to reach Asian cultural practitioners. So again, this means you need investment also parallelly on communication once the profile itself is ready. So these were some of the big sort of questions that we landed on. And I think the need is urgent. Every time I talk to colleagues in Asia and show them the India profile, which is very old now, 2016, it's still something people are like, wow, I didn't know this about India, and I'm working in India for the last 30 years in the cultural sector. And I think still there is value in putting out the old profiles, getting people excited. There's much more, I would say, local funding opportunities now in many parts of Asia, so perhaps updates could be done with local funding. But I think the vision is really to start looking for funding locally or internationally that would be long-term, which would see the bigger picture value of this project, and to find like-minded colleagues, organizations, collectives, which will commit to this in the long run. This is one of the projects I'm really passionate about, and Ulrike and the Compendium colleagues to know this. And I think it's high time that in a part of the world where the creative economy is a buzzword and the arts are booming, that cultural workers and civil society also take their role as watchdogs and as policy, monitoring very, very seriously. And for that, a tool like this would be invaluable.